here's Brody Brazil.
So, full transparency, as I'm recording this, the Super Bowl is not even over yet. I mean, the game is late third quarter and the Eagles have a 27-0 lead. So, basically, it's over, and I rarely would do this, but I'll just say it right now. Congratulations to the Eagles on winning this year's Super Bowl championship. And I guess also congratulations to the NFL on Fox for debuting their brand new graphics package here in the biggest football game of the season. I know a lot of people say, why would you do this? They're not the only ones. They've done this before. CBS has done this before. NBC has done this before. They introduced the graphics package for next football season in the final football game of this season, and sometimes even their other sports. I don't know if baseball on Fox is going to pick this up or any of the other Fox properties if they will carry this graphics package, but this one caught a lot of people's attention because it looks a little bit different than what they're used to. And this is the score bug, right? This is what's up on your screen during a game for the majority of every contest that you watch across national and regional and local networks. And so this is what initially keys people up on, okay, this is a little bit different here. Something's different. And it's kind of this minimalistic approach. It doesn't have like a line that goes across the bottom of the whole screen, or even this top left corner up here, or even the top middle. And there is kind of no line. Everything is contained to basically a little bit wider than the middle third of the screen. And there is no like backdrop color here. There's nothing like a gradient that sits behind it that makes these graphics right here pop on the screen. It's very minimalistic. I think we can all agree that it's almost like real big text. I mean, look at the size of the text on KC and Philadelphia right there. Like the text in terms of the box, it's not, a big box and a tiny KC. It's a big box and a giant KC, and a giant PHI is the team indicator inside that box. It's almost like they know you might be watching this game on a small screen and you want the absolute biggest text possible so that, like in this case, you're watching this video so that you can see those tiny little letters as best as possible. They made them as big as they could be. The other thing that people noticed is like there's no background behind the two scores right there. And sometimes, depending on what is behind the screen, now a lot of times it's the green football field, but what happens if it's, fans here in the background, it's a little bit hard to read what the actual score is sometimes because it's competing with the background. There's not enough separation between the graphics and the background. A lot of people also pointed out too that like that little tiny square or rectangular box is just a gray or transparent black box right there, and the time and the quarter barely sit. I mean, that's the tiny part. It's hard to even see that, read that. Yeah, it's in the middle as it should be, but maybe it is not big enough. I'll be honest, I'm naming all the criticisms here. I kind of like some things about this. I like the fact that you can do quarterback stats on one side or you can do another team stat on the other side. You know who really made this popular is like the Apple TV telecasts of Major League Baseball, the Friday night telecast on Apple TV. They do a really good job of putting real minimal information. There's no graphic down there. It's just text. It's in your corners, and it also goes along with the logo and sometimes the event bug, like in the case of Fox and the Super Bowl that are top right. But it's really simple down here in the corner. You can also use this as kind of some dead space because there's just no bar, no color, no gradient that's competing in the background. I also like the fact that they put like the down and yardage right there. They put the play clock also on that same bar. So they're very much using the space wisely. It's a minimalistic approach. I got to say, in terms of this being the number one thing that a lot of people see, I like it, although I understand it's quite disjointing because it's not what a lot of people are used to. Here's another graphic. Now, this is more of what we call a lower third in television, as in it takes up the lower third of your screen, and it's simplistic, right? It doesn't have a background behind it. It doesn't have an outline to it. That's the other thing. Going back to the score, and we'll see another example of it in just a second, I think the only thing to fix it would be a little bit of framing, right? Like this goes here, that goes there, and some lines in the background and some depth, some separation to kind of make it all make a little bit more sense. Everything's just kind of floating around maybe too much, but I like this, right? And you can kind of see that down here, there is a little bit of a gradient. Like look how dark the grass is there versus what it is right there. So there is a little bit of a gradient. I just think there needs to be a little bit more of a darker area, let's say from that orange line down, to help differentiate this text right here from the actual background. But in terms of, hey, using a logo, using the identifier, I like that font. I like the gradient on the font. I mean, that is a big, bold font right there. There's 3 lines. There's a little info bar at the bottom. It doesn't need backgrounds. This stuff is simple. That one stands out. That one is just fine. They're also still using the caricatures, the cartoon characters of players. I guess that's cool. I mean, I'm not really against that. It's not my favorite thing either, but it's unique. It's different. It's something that I've seen other networks start to copy just a little bit, trying to introduce more of an artificial element to the broadcast instead of, just the headshot. That's the old thing. Anybody can do a headshot, but now they're introducing these caricature drawings. And I would say here's kind of an example, right? Like you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of text plus the player's position and number right there. That's a lot to fit on a screen and kind of without a background right here, right? Like let me redraw this. Without kind of like a gradient backdrop. See, even what I did right there, I drew around it. That kind of makes you focus on it a little bit better if there was some type of line around it or a gradient behind it, an opaque gradient behind it that made that text pop. It doesn't have to be much. It could just be a rectangle, but I feel like there's got to be something back there. Otherwise, it's hard to read this on a screen. Even in a 4K situation, it's kind of hard to read that on a screen. The text is competing with the background. This is going to a commercial break. Oh my goodness, it was already 17-0. 4:49 left in the second quarter. That was, the biggest, almost the second biggest halftime lead in Super Bowl history. They're going to show that in just a second. I like this, though, going to break, right? The lower third, it's really simple. KC, Philadelphia, they actually, and this is kind of rare, in more recent graphics packages of professional sports and college sports, they always normally put like the logo to one side or the other here. This graphics package is not using either team's logo. It's just got the identifier of KC and PHI and the team's colors, and that's it. So they are keeping it pretty simple. I like this in the middle. It's a simple fox and the Super Bowl logo there. So actually going to break, I think this is super clean. Like you don't need much more than that. It's just that the score bug looks a lot like that. For Tom Brady and Kevin Burkhardt, when they showed up on screen, now I got to say this is separate from the graphics package. Why are we doing all this green screening behind broadcasters now on the national broadcasts? In a sense that we know you're in the booth. We know that Bourbon Street is not behind you. We know that, right? So why are you trying to make it look like you're somewhere totally different? I get it. It's adding to the atmosphere, the ambiance. We don't necessarily need that. Sorry, I bumped the microphone. Now that's all I can think about. But maybe this, even down here, deserves a little bit more of a background to help it pop. But quite simple. I love the font. I love the gradient of that font. I think that font alone, that real big, thick, chunky font is a win all in itself. So what happens when they do other things? What happens when they've got the Skycam and they want to throw up some game graphics, some infographics on the bottom left of your screen? I like this, right? We don't need each team's logo. It's just got the colors. It's very simple. In fact, you kind of don't even need team names right there. If you really wanted to simplify this, you could just do that. And I would totally understand, like, the Eagles have had the ball a lot more and for a lot longer than Kansas City has. They've done a lot more with it. I think at one point Kansas City had 10 plays and the Eagles had 10 first downs. But I'm saying, like, that's a good graphic there in the corner. It's simple. It's not too overdone. But see how these numbers, the white text, they have that black background? That's kind of the background I'm talking about for everything else. It helps you separate that text from whatever video is behind it on the screen. Now, I really like this. Here on a punt, right? You've got information on the punter, you've got information on the returner, and this is what I was talking about, how scorebugs used to take up the entire screen, right? Like all this information over here, or all that space, and maybe it would say, Fox over here, and it would say Super Bowl, I'm just going to call it LIX over here. They would use all that stuff, all that space down there to fill it up, and then they would have nothing up here. I kind of like the fact that normally it's just cut off here and there. They get to use this space for whatever they want. And I feel like in the future, as this graphics package evolves, they're going to start using this space for more information, more analytics, dare I say fantasy stuff, dare I say sports wagering. information. I don't even want to put that in their heads, but I know that's what they're already going to do with it. I also like the fact here, if I didn't mention it before, they keep the timeouts right below the teams. I mean, there's a lot of information up on your screen, and it's done in such a minimal way. I mean, look at that, barely even takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say that takes 1/6 of the screen if I'm here to measure it out. That's so efficient. That's so minimal. Back in the day, right, in a 4:3 standard definition situation, you could kind of only use, let me redraw this again. This was like the safe area. So you had to fit all your graphics, I'll do it in blue, by that corner, that's it. You could never have anything way out here on the screen. Now, because we're in, 2025 and everything is been HD for a long time and now 4K and eventually 8K, you can use all this space, look at that, all the way basically to almost the very corner of the screens there. So I like that. I like how they've used that. Again, going to break here, and there's another one of these situations where it's a little bit hard to read that score, right? And I like the corner, so you saw going to break how they had one that was kind of front and center, bottom, middle of the screen. This one's kind of in the corner over here, which is fine. It lets the rest of the screen do the talking, but even this text right here is competing with this camera person, their camera, their head, their eye, their face, right? Like, could there be like a little bit of gray or black behind there? Could there be a square that just goes behind that text? I know I keep saying this to give it more depth, to give it a little bit more separation. I feel like just looking at that, and even when the video is moving, it's a little bit hard to read. I like it, but it just needs a little bit of background. Again, good uses of this score bug. And I understand what people are saying of why it looks too simple. It looks dumbed down. It looked like the Microsoft Paint version of a score bug. But I like the fact that they can now keep it simple while plays going on and fly in the Patrick Mahomes caricature and have his stats. Oh my goodness, he was under pressure. He's been under pressure all night long so far. Has the game changed, by the way? I'm just putting it on the screen here. It looks like Kansas City, might have got a touchdown. Might have scored some points in this game. Do I have that right? So they just got a touchdown end of the third quarter as I'm recording this. Okay, yeah, just goes to show you in real time how this game has actually gone. Anyway, so I like the fact that there is some flexibility with this package. It's simple, and then it can branch out to something a little bit more complex. And again, another lower third here, and this time the font is not really competing with too much in the background, even though the Super Bowl midfield logo or quarter, one of the logos, the Super Bowl logo itself on the field is kind of competing with it. Is that midfield? Yeah, that's the 50. There we go. I should have just said midfield. But sometimes there's things behind the text that just compete with it. So I wish it stood out a little bit more. But it's clean, right? We're used to seeing, and I'm going to show you an example of this at halftime because they still use kind of an old graphic for halftime. We're still used to seeing it in a box, in a rectangle, in a square. And that's what I was saying about the score bug earlier, is that maybe they could use a little bit more framing and lines around things just to tie everything together a little bit more than it is right here. Otherwise, it's kind of floating out of nowhere. This is it, right? This is typical of what sports graphics used to look like. And if I'm being honest here, what you're seeing from this Fox package is a lot more of a trend. Like, here's your rectangle, right? And your rectangle, like, you can't see through the rectangle here. It's a very solid background. But that way, the logos, which, again, there's logos on this. There's no logos on really the new Fox package. The text pops. The text pops here. The logos pop. Both colors pop. And you know what? This is fine, too. I really like the edges here, the corners, how they're a little bit beveled, how it really feels like New Orleans with those beveled edges. But again, this is more of a representation at halftime of what sports graphics used to be on Fox and everywhere else. And to be honest, what they've done with this new package is kind of the future. So here's my overall thoughts just to sum everything up. I appreciate Fox's attempt at simplicity and minimalism. It's definitely impossible to make their debut, like roll this all out for the Super Bowl and have it be perfect. There's going to be some criticism. People were not used to this graphics package. It's like, wow, that's totally different. It caught me by surprise. Wasn't expecting that. And it's going to take them a little while to get accustomed to it. I bet you, though, by Thanksgiving of next year, you see that look on all the games, and you will totally be used to it. It probably needs to pop a little bit more and get that depth on the background. I keep saying that, and that's really my only one criticism of it, is to make that separation happen between the background. But yeah, what you're seeing here, like, this is the future trend of graphics, sports graphics on network television, whether it's the NFL, NBA, hockey, or baseball. It's just going to be a much more simple version of the things that you've kind of already known. And you know what? Since I pulled it up, I just want to go back to this real quick. The only thing I would add here in terms of just like framing this up a little bit better would be to maybe add, you know, a square around this. Just darken it up just a little bit so you get some separation, and maybe a little bit of a gradient. Not even that, like maybe a gradient of lines or something, or hashes kind of in the corner that just adds some separation behind the text. It really is simple as that. Overall, I don't mind this. I know a lot of people didn't like it. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Also, since you made it here to the end, thumbs up on this video. That'll help me, this video, and this channel. And if you're new here, which you might be, don't forget to go down there and hit that subscribe button. I try to make great stuff for you, and I hope to see you back here next time.